So last year this little pink box was kitted out for a quest into Adventure Tarot, to track down a mystery that had grabbed my mind and refused to let go. A mystery that began inside a tarot deck, inside this one, the Dark Goddess Tarot. Amongst the images and the stories of goddesses, amongst their mythological tales of female power, one card presented more mystery than story, more questions than answers. One card beckoned me in to find out more. Which card? This one, the Sheela Na Gig. The Sheela Na Gig, the teller, the hag or the witch, the earth mother, the evil eye stone, the witch on the wall, as many names as questions. For me, the stark imagery of this female figure in a posture of display was always going to invite lots of questions. Why? Who was she? Why this display? And the question for me became even more wrapped in mystery when I realised that it's a stone figure found on Christian churches with Christian origins. It just seemed to make no sense. The witch on the wall and Christian churches seemed a juxtaposition of opposing forces, and the questions began, and I was hooked, beckoned forwards, and the quest began. A quest that would lead me to this book, a fantastic book telling the stories and the beliefs around the Sheelas, with maps of England and Ireland and a catalogue of where to find all of the Sheelas in Britain and Ireland. It led me to Shropshire and also to Kilpeck. You see here in the book a picture of the Kilpeck Sheela Na Gig in Herefordshire, where I grew up. So the next thing, to get in the car and to go visit face to face with tarot deck in hand. Site visits like this one, this is Kilpeck Church, you can see here, quickly brought into play the spirit of place as well, and just the setting and the nature in the setting all added into the whispers that the Sheela was throwing into the air, into my soul. It was incredible from the get-go. These medieval sites opening up further secrets, further combinations of the land spirits speaking. Walking these medieval sites and seeing the Sheelas and sitting in these sites pulling tarot cards was opening up a conversation, an exploration, a true quest to find out who the Sheelas were. Right from the get-go, there were links to Bridget, there was links to the hag, there were links to Crow Mothers and the Morrigan. Right from the get-go in these early tarot readings, the Sheelas and the place where we were whispering who they were whispering messages of spiritual paths and divine enlightenment, bringing in other goddesses I was already working with that were already familiar. It was the same thing at the church at Tugford in Shropshire when we visiting two of the smallest Sheelas in Britain. Again here it was not so much the Sheelas themselves as the Sheelas themselves, with conversations with tarot, with spirit of place. The landscape seemed to join in with the whispers that we were hearing about who the Sheelas actually are, there was definitely a conversation to be found here right at the beginning of this quest. So the Sheelas over time have been thought to be many things, and it's still a mystery. People still don't know for sure, but in this video I want to share what I've found out about them so far and what I personally have come to believe whilst on this quest to these incredible places. What I've come to believe from listening to the tarot, listening to the spirit of place, and listening to the Sheelas themselves as I've visited them, sat with them, communed with them through tarot, and also as I've drawn them over and over again in my art studio. A journey through many faces of the Sheela, a journey into sacred geometry, a journey of channeling Sheelas through art. This the most surprising aspect of the quest, this taking me into leaps of faith to just keep trusting that there is a message here behind channeling the Sheelas through my artwork. This a magical practice of art witchery. So this is a video about the quest so far. Have any of the questions been answered? I think they have. But first I want to take you through other people's opinions of what the Sheelas are and where I feel I align or differ. I want to share some of the answers to the questions that art and visiting and journaling and meditating and tarot practice has uncovered for me. I think knowing who the Sheelas are and the message behind them is useful for all of us, whoever we may be, and whether the quest calls to you loudly or not. So my first face-to-face meeting was with the two Sheelas in that Tugford church in Shropshire. In the church notices, the Sheelas were described as fertility symbols, and fertility power is part of their story. Barren women would scrape the figures to get fertility dust for magic for themselves, and many of the Sheelas around Britain and Ireland show these signs of rubbing. So whether dust was collected for fertility reasons or for general healing, but other things, one thing is certain: the touching of the Sheelas shows clearly that they were viewed to have magical benefits and power. They weren't just simply the decoration of a plain church for aesthetics. Indeed, some Sheelas still have ongoing ritual magic practices happening today. These ongoing rituals today provide us with a bridge to the past and an essence of their original theme, and the original story behind the Sheelas was held in magic beliefs. They were figures that held power. So, are they healing fertility symbols? Yes, but no, only in part. Fertility symbols and other mother goddesses, they're normally depicted seated, and they show abundance and roundness and plumpness, youth and comfort and nurturing, whereas the Sheelas are skinny, they're grotesque, they're old, their ribs are showing, they're flat-breasted, more hag-like than a representation of youth in its reproductive glory. The vulva of the Sheela may be on full display, suggesting a portal for birth and fertility. But other features of the figure, so often described as grotesque, they just don't line up fully with the Sheela just as a fertility goddess. It's more a direct acknowledgement of female power, and of course birth and fertility is in the mix there, but only as a small part of a much bigger story. So if the act of displaying the Sheela isn't about birth and fertility, then we loop back to the question, why again? There was a school of thought that linked similar figures in France, Normandy and Spain to the Sheelas. These figures were built in a Romanesque style and were part of larger carvings which acted as warnings to the congregation about sin. They were warnings about lust and paths to hell if you succumb. This led to a belief that the Sheelas were warnings against sin. However, the exhibitionist female carvings overseas were often surrounded by men in lewd acts. They weren't like the Sheelas of Britain and Ireland, which are carved on single stones, often called evil eye stones. The Sheelas here don't warn of female temptation and sin and lust, but they speak more of female power and magic. The Sheelas here are not warnings in this respect. So, not a warning to a sinful congregation about hell damnation snapping at their heels. But how about a warning to invading forces? Were they a protection symbol? Again, not really, because many of the Sheelas are placed in impossible to see places. So in this respect, they couldn't be warnings in the real physical realm to ward off attacks. However, when we enter a magical realm, their influence to avert evil does come into play. Protection on a magical level, good luck charms against unseen attacks from a spiritual place, a magical place. At every turn with every Sheela, she takes us by the hand and leads us back to the magical, to realms beyond the physical. She holds this bigger place at every turn. The Sheela, beyond just fertility, beyond just a birth passage, beyond just a simple talisman for protection, she is a bigger story. So where else are these big stories found? If we go back to the repeated ever-present features of the Sheelas, the large head, the flat breasts, the grotesque nature, the bald heads, visible ribs, we're returned over and over to the idea of the hag. The hag appears over and over again in Celtic tradition and stories about sovereignty, of tracking down rightful kings, of weeding out the unrighteous. We are led via the hag to the banshee, to war goddesses, to the Morrigan. We're led via the hag away from life to death. The image of the female on display, the vulva, leading us from birth to death. We're in a journey now, a passage. And this journey from life to death, it's no surprise, for in Celtic society, warfare and death were closely tied up with birth and fertility. There was always this dual aspect in Celtic living, the dual aspect of opposing forces, war and peace, fighting and protection, good and evil, life and death. They were all interdependent. In the Celtic world, death implicitly involved a spiritual birth, transformation or ascending, an awakening. And I think it's here that we begin to get to the crux of the Sheela. the Sheela as a portal. The Sheela is a portal representing birth linked to the hag and death, birth and death in equal measure. A portal to other realms, no matter which direction a soul is travelling. The Sheela then represents a magical portal to transformation, to ascension, and ultimately to hope. It's a place where even Christian and pagan stories blur, where opposites are held together. The Sheela therefore becomes an incredible symbol that surpasses the power of any weapon or any circumstance. Through this female form, we actually see a link to the divine, a magical power that would win any war, can overcome any weapon. And as I continued my research, in astonishment I found links to the Sheela as the Morrigan and as Bridget, and here you see a war goddess followed by the power of Bridget to heal, injury, healing, death, life, the Morrigan, Bridget. And of course the Morrigan and Bridget are the two goddesses that I'm already working with. Could it be that in the Sheela I found a combination of the Morrigan with Bridget, my two goddesses? Is this why the Sheela had called to me so strongly? The Sheela is a portal. In my artwork, the whisper that had been given to me over and over again was of the portal and of lifeboats and safety, of boundaries, of rebirth. The portal to other realms appeared again and again in my journaling and sketchbooks. It's exactly the message that I'd also been given in tarot readings at the feet of the Sheelas. A place where separate forces of different worlds can meet, birth and death in equal measure, rebirth, regeneration, averting evil, safety, female power, of starting again, of hope, of transcending evil, of healing, the Morrigan and strength, Bridget, and the power to move on again. A combining of opposites to create a space of transcending. And then I realised through all of this what I had actually been looking at all along. When you simplify the Sheela down to her basic shape, I'd been looking at the Vesica Pisces all along. The Vesica Pisces, of course, the very beginnings of sacred geometry, the place where two circles overlap. One circle, the divine, God, source, whatever you care to call it, when source replicates itself and creates mankind, the material world. The overlapping area is the Vesica Pisces. Here is the portal. Here is the vulva of the Sheela Na Gig. The almond shape found within sacred geometry that's even called the womb of the universe. It's the meeting place of the divine and the material world. There's the portal. We see it everywhere. We see it in Christian artwork, often surrounding Mary or Jesus. People knew from the start that this shape was sacred, that this shape was magical, this shape was a portal to the divine. Here you can see it within Christian art. Over and over again we see this sacred shape, a portal to something bigger than us, the bigger story. Of course, I saw it when I visited Glastonbury in the Chalice Well Gardens, one of the most iconic representations of the Vesica Pisces can be found on the chalice well lid. There it is. Do you see it? The Sheela Na Gig portal, the Vesica Pisces. And that's what I've come to believe the Sheela Na Gig is. Right from the start, when I first saw this card, there's that shape, not just about birth and fertility, but about death as well, a two-way journey. And stepping into that portal, it's like a lifeboat, a raft. There are universes behind it we can step through and into and ascend. We can heal, we can birth again, we can let things die within this space. There is that meeting of the Morrigan and Bridget, the stars of different universes. I was whispered to put on that shape, the rainbow and hope and worlds beyond the rainbow. It was all there, safety and boundaries and rebuilding and redrawing boundary lines for ourselves in healing journeys. It was all there, letting go of toxic waters from the past, letting things die. The shape whispered to me over and over again. This was the biggest story of the Sheela, a story about female power to give birth and let die. The tombstones had whispered, and drawing life paths through the tombs. Crow feathers had whispered to me in my artwork. I'd wondered why I was drawing the wings of the Morrigan onto this shape. I now know why. It's the hag and the cry of the banshee, the war goddess over death, and the healing milk of Bridget to rebirth ourselves. There is so much power within the imagery of the Sheela Na Gig. For me, it comes down to a portal to somewhere else, hand in hand with the divine, whatever that means to you. So thanks guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.